Hello, welcome to this seminar. Just before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. Oh, my video's off, there we go. If you require live captions, they are available. They're not completely accurate, so please do email us if you need an accurate transcript or if you know someone who does. This seminar is being recorded, but we are in webinar view today, so you will be off screen. If you want to ask a question, please make use of the Q&A box. There are quite a lot of you on the seminar today, so we have enabled upvoting of questions. So if you see a question you want answered, please do upvote it so that we can answer it at the end. This talk will run for approximately 45 minutes and then there'll be about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So without further ado, I want to hand over to our speaker, Dr. Jennifer Wild, who is an associate professor in experimental psychology and is going to talk to us today about overcoming stress, 7 key tools. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Beverly, for inviting me. Hi, everybody. We are going to have a little bit of an interactive session today. So just to say that you'll need your smartphones, and there's a Vivox ID number at the top of this slide. You don't need it immediately, but just to say that that is the ID number, and it will appear on the slides later when we do the Vivox exercises. So my name's Jennifer Wild, and it's true, I'm a trauma expert, but what can trauma and stress teach us about resilience, about overcoming stress? So as a psychologist, I specialize in helping people to overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. That's the crippling stress reaction that afflicts soldiers and other survivors of terrible events. As a scientist, I develop and test strategies to prevent PTSD. I've built programs based on the latest science to improve resilience for people in the most stressful and dangerous jobs as police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and now ICU workers. In my 20 years of practice, I've noticed something remarkable. The tools that transform trauma and extreme stress are the same tools that lead people to achieve extraordinary success, that lead people to supercharge their resilience. So there are 7 key tools we've researched in my lab. In this talk, I'll give you a snapshot of them so that you can better manage the anxiety and stress in your lives and progress your path to success stress-free. So the first tool I call focus on facts, not feelings, to deal with worry. So science shows that 88% of our worries never come true. And one of the best ways to discover this is to keep a worry diary for a week. So you note your worry and then the outcome, and then you tally it. How many worries did you have? How many came true? You'll likely discover that your worries come true much less often than you feel they will, which is good news. It means when you spot your worrying, you can remind yourself of a reassuring fact that most of your worries don't come true. So research shows that the best thing to do when you do spot that you're worrying is to disengage from it. And that can be quite tricky, can't it, when we're caught up in our head worrying about the future. So we need to think about, well, how is the best way to disengage from worry? So a really interesting study carried out at King's in London found that picturing the likely outcome to your worry, now that's an outcome based on facts, not fear, and of you coping no matter what comes your way, or picturing any positive image, such as sunshine, led to dramatic decreases in anxiety and worry. So the team at King's trained people who had uncontrollable worry to practice replacing their worry with images of possible positive outcomes in their mind's eye, or they trained them to talk through possible positive outcomes using words and not images or pictures, or to picture positive images such as sunshine or a waterfall that were completely unrelated to their worries. And everyone in the study benefited from reductions in anxiety and distress and sustained these improvements 1 month later. So what this means is that when you spot your worrying, use this as a cue to picture a possible positive outcome to your worry or even a positive image like sunshine. You'll feel less anxious as a result. And so what we can see on this slide is the blue bar are the people who had uncontrollable worry, and they were asked to picture a possible outcome and to rehearse that when the worry came to mind. The red line represents using words rather than images. And so when they had a worry come to mind, they would give it a likely outcome based on facts, not feeling, but rather than picturing the outcome. And then the yellow line there represents when the worry came to mind, they would finish the worry or move the worry on to a positive image, such as sunshine or waterfall or a field, for example, maybe something like this. And what you can see, all groups did equally well and sustained significant reductions in worry and anxiety just by interrupting the worry cycle. So I think that really underscores the importance of recognizing when we're worried and actually doing our best to disengage from it. So I'd like to move now to our first VVOX exercise. And I'd like you to pick a positive image that you might be able to use in the future to interrupt a worry. So let me just pull up VVOX. I have to, okay, so here we go. So name the image, the positive image that you'll call to mind to interrupt a worry cycle. So that could be image of sunshine, a beach, a meadow, could be you winning a race, could be you lifting weights, could be a relaxing image of having a drink with a mate. So give the name to the image and enter it on VVOX. You'll need to use one word only. And if you can start to enter some of those images. So this is fantastic. This is great. Beach is very popular. So the words that are bigger are the ones that more people are entering. So excellent. Excellent. Beach is definitely the most popular. That's fantastic. Trees are good. Waves, puppies, butterfly, sunset, smiling, woodland. These are excellent. Nature, puppies, dog, cozy, butterfly, nature, houseplants. Excellent. Well done. Family. Sea is getting more popular. Lovely. Mountains. So you get the idea. So it can be a positive image such as this, and we can use that to interrupt a worried us. Cat. Good to see cat there. Excellent. Well done, everybody. Yeah, cat's actually very popular. Beach is definitely the most popular. So well done. Excellent. Okay. So I will come back to the slides in a moment, but what I'd like you to do is take a moment to call to mind a worry that you may have. So it could be a deadline you're worried about. It could be a problem with coding you haven't cracked, a difficult conversation you're due to have with a colleague, a spouse, or a friend. I'd like you to call the worry to mind and focus your mind on the worry, and then introduce this image that you've inputted into VVOX. So get a really clear picture of your image. So the worry to mind, don't need to give it loads of attention, but just have that in mind and then move it on to the image that you've identified. So the beach, the sunshine, mountains, the sea, waves, cat, puppies, nature. Really move that worry on to focus your full attention on the image in mind. Excellent. So with that really clear image in mind, what I'd like you to do is when you spot your worrying in the future and getting caught up in overthinking, call this image to mind to interrupt the cycle and get out of your head. We know that worrying doesn't solve problems. We need our next tool to solve problems. So I'll come back to these slides now. Great. So hopefully those are full screen. Yeah, so to solve problems, we need practical thinking. This is the second key and crucial skill. So extraordinary thinking is not overthinking. So practical thinking is akin to extraordinary thinking. It's about how to move forwards. It's not why the past happened in the way that we feel it did. Extraordinary thinking nips dwelling in the bud because dwelling takes us round and round in circles, makes us feel rubbish, and leads to no plan or action. So I'd like you to imagine this. You wake up early on Wednesday morning and you have a really important meeting that you're chairing on Zoom at 9 a.m. So you switch on your laptop and the screen is black, it doesn't start. You press the on and off button again and it doesn't start and you're starting to feel a bit sweaty. What's going on? So thoughts race through your mind. Why won't my laptop start? Why is this happening today of all days? Why didn't I spot problems with it last night? Why do problems like this always happen to me? So I want you to imagine this is happening to you. You can't start your laptop and these thoughts are racing through your minds. Why do these things always happen to you? Always happen to me. Why do these things always happen to me? Imagine this is happening to you. How might you be feeling? And just, we'll come back to Vivox. Okay, so how might you be feeling thinking about why do these problems always happen to me? Why isn't my laptop working? And if you could just enter that feeling in here. Exactly, you'd be feeling anxious, overwhelmed, annoyed, unprofessional, unlucky. Yep. Yep, some of you may be feeling incompetent, worried, stupid, sad, panicked, failed, stressed for sure, vulnerable, frustrated, defeated. Yeah, you would be feeling quite negative, wouldn't you? Wouldn't be a kind of pleasant feeling. Excellent, well done, everybody. Great. So now I want you to imagine the same scenario again, and this time your laptop doesn't start, you have that important meeting you're going to chair on Zoom, and you think, how can I best deal with this? How can I chair the meeting at 9 a.m.? So in the first scenario with why thoughts swelling your mind, you'll be more inclined to run back to bed and pull the duvet over your head. In the second scenario, how thoughts guide problem solving and decision making. So you'll be able to find a solution such as suggesting to chair the meeting over your mobile or even calling in on your landline. So dwelling, like worry, is an unproductive pattern of thinking. And the more you do it, it's like a bad habit. The more you strengthen the neural pathways in your brain, making it the default mode of thinking when you encounter disappointment or stress. So I want us to look now at what happens when health professionals dwell. Oops. So we looked at almost 500 health professional student paramedics, which you'll see on this slide. So they had just joined the London Ambulance Service, which is the largest emergency service in the world. And we assessed them in their first week of training. We looked at loads of different cognitive and behavioral character features, personality variables, psychological variables. We really assessed a lot of different variables. And then we were really interested in whether or not any of these factors could predict whether or not somebody became unwell within their first 2 years of working for the London Ambulance Service. And interestingly, what we found was that the student paramedics who joined the LAS and identified themselves as having a propensity to dwell over the past were on track to develop post-traumatic stress disorder within the first 2 years of working. And those paramedics who joined the service and indicated that they were unable to adapt to change, they had difficulty dealing with whatever came their way, meaning they had low or unhelpful appraisals about resilience, we're on track to develop a course of depression. So the importance of these findings is that it's essential that we spot when we're thinking in a dwelling style, such as when we have repetitive negative thinking and no plan or action in relation to questions that come to mind, and we're overthinking a topic for more than 30 minutes. And we want to spot when our thinking is full of whys and turn that why thinking to how. So why becomes your cue to think, how can I move forwards? Rather than why did this happen? So how can I move forwards? Another study that we conducted with healthy students was looking at what happens if we change how we think and are then exposed to trauma. So we trained students to think in whys, like why do bad things happen? And we exposed them to real life footage, but was very unpleasant film footage of car accidents happening. And another group of students were trained to think, but how is this situation going to be resolved? And then they watched this real life traumatic footage. And what we'll see here on this slide is that the students who were trained to think in how is the situation going to be resolved, they were trained to think in how, more concrete, more practical way, developed much fewer unwanted memories and much lower stress symptoms within the following week. Whereas those people who had been trained to think about why these horrible things happened were much more likely to have intrusive memories of the trauma films and much more likely to have PTSD symptoms. So again, really underscoring the need to spot when we're dwelling, disengage from it. And one way to disengage from it is simply to be able to think about how to move forwards. The next tool I'd like to chat with you about is called Then versus Now. And Then versus Now is a tool that helps us to break the link to the past unpleasant memories. So it originated as a trauma treatment tool, and it helps to unhook the present from the past by helping you to focus on how now is different to then, rather than focusing on how the situations may be similar. For example, if you've spoken up in a meeting and you've had a flat response, next time, focus on how different the new environment is to the past, not how similar it is. So perhaps there are different team members in the meeting room, perhaps your slides are different. Notice how keen people look to hear what you have to say. Focus on the many ways now is different to then. Focusing on what you can see and hear in the here and now keeps you rooted in the present and keeps your attention out of your head and away from feelings and past painful memories. It keeps you absorbed in the task at hand, which is where you need to be resilient. And how do we know this? Well, we trained people to distinguish between then and now before exposing them to trauma footage. So the then versus now group, the cloud on the left, were trained to focus on the differences between trauma that they were seeing, and so they watched these trauma films, and then the one group had been trained to think about the differences in their environment compared to the trauma they had seen. One group was told, if you get unwanted memories about the films you've just watched, push the memories out of your mind, try really hard to get rid of the memories. And then another group was trained to do whatever they want when the unpleasant memory of the trauma films came to mind. And what you'll see here is that the group, the blue bar, were the group that were trained to distinguish between what's going on in their environment now and how different that is to the past trauma film when they were reminded of the trauma film. And the yellow bar is the group that were just asked to do whatever they would normally do when an unwanted memory came to mind. And then the red bar is the group that were taught to push the memories out of their mind when an unwanted memory of the trauma film came to mind. So you can see that then versus now was really the most effective strategy for reducing unwanted memories. Okay, so the next tool is Plan Ahead. It's a really simple tool, and there is a lot of science to planning ahead. Several studies have come out of my lab that show that making a plan in the evening for the next day and including one enjoyable activity in your plan dramatically improves moods, well-being, and productivity. So we tend to suggest to plan your next day in half-hour chunks and use the plan as a schedule to guide you and revamp it and recreate it through the day, especially when you discover how long it takes to reply to emails, wrap up a Zoom meeting or a patient consultation or other activity that you may need to do. So planning ahead works because it moves routine decision-making to the night before, which frees you up to tackle challenging tasks the next day. It frees up your mental energy to tackle the challenging tasks the next day. So having a detailed plan makes you more productive, meaning you'll be more likely to reach your goals. And of course, including a fun activity, even for a few minutes, in your plan makes it more likely that you'll do something fun, which increases well-being. So in a study of 100 frontline paramedics, we trained one group to plan ahead for 2 weeks, just to make a plan in the evening of all the activities they needed to do hour by hour for the next day, and include an enjoyable activity in their plan. And then the red bar, also paramedics, were given reading about how to reduce stress, essentially. It was reading on mental health. And then the yellow bar, were given no specific task to practice over 2 weeks. And what you can see very clearly in this graph is that the group that were instructed to plan ahead, plan their next days, and they did this for 2 weeks, had significant reductions in psychological distress compared to the reading group and the no task group. So it's a really simple exercise that really does reduce psychological distress. Okay, so moving on to the next tool, one of my favorite tools, I call this the 3-minute carrot to kick avoidance. So avoidance keeps stress going, it keeps anxiety going. There's no other outcome with avoidance. So achieving a more centered life means kicking avoidance. It means choosing what is best for you rather than what is easiest. So one common behavior among students and staff is procrastination. It's putting off for tomorrow what would be best done today. So if you're struggling to get started with something you're avoiding, use the 3-minute carrot. Give yourself permission to try the new behavior for just 3 minutes. Then at that point, reassess how you're feeling and give yourself permission to carry on for another 3 minutes if you choose, or to stop. You can also break the first step into tiny steps and take the first tiny step to start. So it's manageable, for example, to complete a small step like write an outline for my essay or grant application before the bigger step, write the background section. So completing the small step gives a sense of achievement and a breath of success to motivate next steps. After the first step, get cozy with smart language to resist temptations to give in to avoidance. So what do I mean by smart language? Using the words I don't rather than I can't when tempted. Use the words I don't rather than I can't when tempted away from your goals. So this is really fascinating research, and studies suggest that if you say I can't when you're tempted away from working on a goal, you'll be more likely to give in to that temptation and give up the goal you had planned to work towards. But if when you're faced with temptation, you use the words I don't, you'll be much more inclined to follow through with the goals. So what does that mean? So it means if a friend rings you up and says, come on, let's go out for a drink, and you respond with, I don't drink on Tuesdays, you'll be much more likely to follow through with the original goal you had planned for that evening, which might be writing that essay. But if when your friend calls and says, let's go out for a drink, be great, it'll be a lot of fun to catch up. Now we're coming out of lockdown, let's just go for a drink on Tuesday evening. And you respond, oh, I can't, I've got to work on this essay. Research shows you'll be much more likely to give in and give up the work that you had planned to do. So that's what we mean by using smart language. So using the words I don't drink on Tuesdays might be more helpful than saying I can't go out tonight because I have an essay to do. Why is that? Well, using the words I don't in response to temptations increases your sense of empowerment with goals, makes you more likely to work towards them. Another key tool to help you over the start line is to make decisions based on how you want to feel, not on how you're actually feeling. So most people make decisions based on how they're feeling in the moment rather than on how they want to feel in the future. So one of the key ways to kick avoidance is to consider how you want to feel in the future and to be guided by this today. So if exercising will make you feel energized and happy, or finishing up an admin task will make you feel relieved and rewarded, make your decision to get started based on how you know it will make you feel, rather than on how you're already feeling. Okay, so the next skill is focus. It absolutely matters what you focus on and how you focus. So people who manage stress well choose to focus on what they can do rather than what they can't. They realize they don't have endless years to will their goals into reality, so they optimize their time. And one of the ways they do this is learning to focus efficiently without distraction. So there are two types of focus. There's helpful and there's unhelpful. Unhelpful attention is focus that's gone inside ourselves to our thoughts, our feelings, our fears, or sensations in our body, like our heart rate. For example, if I can do this, if I was worried about sweating, put some water here. If I was worried about sweating and having a sweaty forehead and my hair looking sweaty, and I didn't want you to see this, I'd soon lose my train of thought if I focused all of my attention on this like visible sweat on my forehead and on my wet hair. And if I had all of my attention on this part of my body, it's really hard to focus on my talk. And if we were doing this together and live in person, I actually wouldn't really get to see you because I'm focused down on this really, really uncomfortable feeling. So I'd soon lose my train of thought. And actually, you know what would happen? I'd draw more attention to the part of my body I don't want you to notice. So helpful attention, on the other hand, is the kind of attention that's out of your head and in the world. So ignoring my fake sweat and focusing on our talk would make me feel more at ease, even though you can see what I've done to my, you can see my hair is a bit wet. But actually not focusing on that and focusing much more on the content of this talk, or if I was with you in person, I'm focusing on you and the audience, would make me feel much more at ease. So it's really, this helpful attention is really about getting out of your head. The other aspect to attention is about being absorbed in the task at hand. So people are most satisfied when they're absorbed in the task at hand, particularly when they're absorbed in something that is challenging enough to be stimulating, but not so challenging that it's frustrating. So what I'd like us to do now is to come back to VVox and name an activity that fully absorbs your attention. Oops, I'm not sure what's happened there, but I'll bring up the VVox in just a sec. I think it's because I got water all over my laptop. My mouse isn't working very well. So name it, so just think about this activity. I'll just bring up the question. Here we go. Oh, sorry, everybody, my mouse is being a bit, I think because there's water. Okay. Yeah, so I just share screen. Okay. So what we want to do is name an activity which fully absorbs your attention. And again, it's just one word if you can. Cooking, reading, yoga, conversation, teaching, running, gardening, swimming, baking, video games, playing, plant, sewing, listening. These are great. Puppy, yeah. Plant watering, netball, gymming. Yeah, exercise is coming up a lot. Writing, yeah, that's true. Being really absorbed in writing can really take your full attention. Breadwork, yeah, fantastic. Dancing, exactly. So it's sort of, to some degree, it's being active, isn't it? It's doing something you really enjoy. But also it can be, you know, with writing, you may not enjoy it so much, but actually being really absorbed in it actually does soon take your full attention, especially if it's a challenge that you have to write a certain number of words in a certain period of time. You have to get a report written. These are brilliant. Love it. Cooking is really popular, and reading, excellent. Baking, fantastic. Cat, nice to see the cat there again. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Great. Okay, let's bring the slides back up. It's here. I think, sorry, it's not letting me, I've got to just go back up before I share it. So hopefully this is full screen. And we're coming on to the final tool. And the final tool is about extending compassion to yourself. So it's extending the compassion you would normally extend to other people, and important to extend compassion to others, of course, but being able to extend compassion to yourself. So speaking to yourself with kindness lowers stress hormones and makes you more optimistic, as well as a better problem solver. Whereas I'm sure you've had the experience of self-critical self-talk really zapping motivation. In a study of almost 200 students, Christian Neff and her team looked at different aspects of experiencing compassion for oneself. That's self-compassion, and its links with positive emotions and qualities. So self-compassion is that capacity to extend kindness towards ourselves in instances of pain or failure or frustration. It's the capacity to normalize our difficult experiences by recognizing that people around the world have similar struggles and that our struggles are part of the larger human experience. So it's also that capacity to see painful thoughts and feelings as passing rather than identifying with them. So Neff and her team discovered that self-compassion was linked to happiness, optimism, positive emotions and qualities such as wisdom, personal initiative, curiosity, agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness. And her team concluded that self-compassion may give rise to happiness and calm because it creates feelings of warmth, connection with others, and a sense of balance or equilibrium. So when we're happy, we're less likely to ruminate or dwell about the past, which is linked to anxiety and depression. So self-compassionate mindset is linked to adaptive coping skills and could keep people feeling optimistic about the future. So feelings of compassion for oneself and others is linked to greater activation of the left prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain linked to joy and optimism. And so people often say to me, you know, I can think kind thoughts of other people, but I really struggle to change my kind of inner critic. So what I would suggest is if you are struggling to speak to yourself with kindness, you could first try to think kind thoughts or carry out kind gestures for other people. So this act of being kind will boost your mood and put you in the frame of mind where it's easier for you to be kind to yourself. So that's one way to overcome that inner critic. So I just have one final exercise for us on VBox. Let's make sure I have that here. Okay, let me just share screen. There we go. So the question is, what is one kind behavior you can do for yourself or someone else today? And again, it will be one word, if you could think about that in one word. One kind behavior you can do for yourself or someone else today. Lovely. Hug, listen, cook. Cooking is very kind. Praise, that's nice. Praise them. Forgive, yeah, really nice. Appreciate, school run, definitely. Compliment, make tea, say thank you. Smile, yoga. Continue, mindfulness, contact, pause. Yeah, really lovely. Listen. So listen is the biggest one. Yeah, listening is it's very kind, isn't it? Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Just come back to the slides. Okay, should work. There There we go. Great. Great. So just to wrap up, everybody feels anxious and stressed from time to time. There are tools to help these times become less frequent, so you can progress your path to success without feeling overwhelmed. So remember, facts, not feelings, to overcome worry. Use a worry diary, and in the midst of a worry, picture a possible positive outcome to the worry or any positive uplifting image. That will help you to get out of your head and disengage from worry. The next tool is practical thinking. It's not overthinking. So dwelling is your cue to get out of your head and spot how to move forwards. Use then versus now to break the link to the past, unhooking the present from past events that fueled self-doubt or anxiety. Plan ahead is something you can do today. Break your days into half-hour chunks and assign your tasks, and include a fun activity, even if brief, in your plan. Kick avoidance. Start a new behavior with a 3-minute carrot. Take a tiny step to get dopamine flowing. Make decisions based on how you want to feel, not on how you're actually feeling. And use the 3-minute carrot to get started. And remember, I don't versus I can't to resist temptations. Focus. Use self-focused attention as a cue to get out of your head. And finally, compassion. Be kind to your mind. Extend the kindness you offer others to yourself. The world benefits from extraordinarily stress-free people. So supercharge your resilience to progress your path to success. You can read much more about these tools in the book, Be Extraordinary: 7 Key Tools to Transform Your Life from Ordinary to Extraordinary. And I will stop there. Thank you for your attention, and we have some time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful talk. Please do add your questions into the Q&A box. You can also ask anonymous questions. You can also upvote questions when they appear. We do have one question already in the chat, which is, would you advise planning ahead the whole day or just the work day?
So that's a really great question. Let me just come out of screen share. I would suggest planning ahead for every day, and particularly people may feel like, oh, I don't need to plan ahead on the weekend, but actually it is actually important to plan ahead, especially if you have a propensity to feeling a bit low. Then the planning ahead is actually really important. So it really does move routine decision making to the night before, which means you have extra mental energy the following day. But also, I think when you plan ahead, you become very aware of how much more time certain things take, and it allows you to allocate more time to that, making sure that you are more likely to get that done, that particular task done. But also it allows you to include an enjoyable activity in your plan, which is super important for improving well-being. So definitely I always suggest planning ahead, and particularly on the weekends, because that's often what we found in our studies. That's when with the students we worked with would want to take a break and not do planning ahead. And actually it didn't always lead to better mood afterwards. So planning ahead definitely every day if you can.
Thank you. So we have an anonymous question, which is, I found overthinking and anxiety to be worse now than at all my professional interactions are virtual. Any tips specifically for this? And thank you for a great talk.
Oh, thank you. So the question is around anxiety and overthinking has heightened with all the virtual meetings and things for professional work. I think what is very helpful is, well, one, recognizing that, that overthinking is happening. I think once we're aware that we're going into a cycle of overthinking, that allows you to spot it and then do something else to disengage from it. So depending on when that happens during the day, with overthinking, the easiest way to stop overthinking, honestly, is just to get up and move around, do some jumping jacks, do a bit of exercise. You would have seen in the VBOX exercise that, one of some of the activities that people put in that absorb their full attention were
exercise, walking, running, those sorts of things. So being active absorbs your full attention. And as soon as you're out of your head, then you've interrupted the overthinking cycle. The problem is once we get into the overthinking cycle, it can go on for quite some time and our mood will really plummet. So it's important to get out of that cycle as soon as possible. In terms of the Zoom meetings, increasing anxiety, that can often happen when we become quite self-focused. So some people say just seeing their image on Zoom can cause them to feel self-focused, and that can increase anxiety. So you can cover up your image with a post-it note. You can hide your image so you're not looking at yourself. But I would also say to recognize what you're worried will happen in a particular meeting, and then test it out and find out what actually happens. So if you're worried about running out of things to say, or somebody judging you negatively and frowning, then I would test it out, make a prediction of what you think will happen, and then make sure that you shift your attention out of your head and away from your body and what you're feeling, and really focus on all the people in the Zoom call and not yourself. And then find out what actually happens, and maybe focus on any feedback that you do get that is not negative. And I think most people find that when they do get feedback, often people don't get feedback, but when they do, it is positive, but we tend to remember the negative feedback. So that might be helpful.
Thank you. Next question is, this is brilliant, thank you. A lot of these skills assume a lot of control over thoughts, symptoms. What would work best if when stressed, one is unable to control stress symptoms such as shallow breathing, etc., when it is impossible to try and shift focus or follow a plan because of the overwhelming physical symptoms of stress?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. When we have a racing heart and we have stress symptoms, it's so easy for that to take our full attention because it's so uncomfortable, and we typically give it more attention. The problem with that is by giving that symptom attention, it actually increases the anxiety and it keeps the stress cycle going. So I often suggest with clients I'm working with who have panic attacks, for example, that we want to do the opposite of what we feel like doing. So often in the middle of a panic attack, we often want to sit down, take deep breaths, have a glass of water. And I would actually suggest trying the opposite of that. So running up and down the stairs, running on the spot, doing some jumping jacks, and then shifting your attention away from that symptom. So if jumping jacks isn't going to shift your attention away from the symptom, then don't do the jumping jacks, but do an activity that's likely to absorb your full attention. So I think recognizing and maybe saying to yourself as well, like, I know this is anxiety and I've coped with this before. I don't need to give my racing heart a lot of attention. I can show myself that my heart is healthy. I could do jumping jacks, or I could go for a walk and absorb my full attention in what I see on my walk. So really choosing an activity that can really absorb your full attention, that is not any sensation going on in your body, and that interrupts that cycle, and that will naturally help your breathing to return to normal and your heart to calm down.
Thank you. The next question is, what can be the balance between planning ahead and feeling anxious or anxiety of the tasks ahead?
Exactly. So we might have an incredibly long to-do list and not a lot of time to get everything done, which can immediately cause people to feel overwhelmed and anxious. So again, it comes back to managing time, and planning ahead does help us to manage time, which can help to reduce anxiety. But I think getting clear on what you're anxious about. So, I mean, it's difficult for me to guess what that might be in a talk of this nature, but it could be anxious about getting work done on time, or getting, meeting a deadline, for example, or, balancing home life with work. But getting clear what you're anxious about, and then making a plan on how to reduce the likelihood of something bad happening. And that often does come back to, in terms of time management and having a really long to-do list, just slotting it into your diary and managing expectations as well. If you create a plan for the week and you say, actually, there's just no way I can get, that 5th report done, then how can you manage expectations of the person you may be working with who you have to submit the report to, and can you maybe extend that or do a shorter report, or just kind of manage the workload. I think planning ahead helps you to identify what is possible and what actually is unrealistic. And then I think targeting what's unrealistic by managing expectations can be helpful.
Thank you. We'll go for a more technical question this time. So for many of your experiments with paramedics, you talked about training them to think in a certain way, e.g. how rather than why or now versus then. What techniques did you use to train them to think that way, and are those techniques we can use ourselves?
Yeah, for sure. So we trained paramedics, and we also trained students to think in how, so we had a few instructions, like when you watch this trauma film, think about how the situation is going to be resolved. What are the next steps? And what is one step that could be taken? So it was very, very concrete like that, very practical, thinking about the practical steps that could be taken, the sequence of events that would best resolve the situation, very concrete like that, as compared to why, which was all about why these things happen, why bad things happen, which is much more abstract. So we wanted to make it more concrete and practical. So that's one way. Just very simple. How can I move forwards? How can I resolve the situation? What is one step that I can take? So that can help. That can even help with a really full workload. And then in terms of then versus now, we were breaking the link between the present and the past. It was really like one key question was, what is different about my environment now? So what is different? Although I can, I can maybe see a car in front of me and there was a car in the accident in the film. What is different about the environment now? Well, it could be the car is not in an accident. It's sunny outside. It was raining and really bad weather in the past. I'm actually at home looking out the window. And in the past, I was in the lab watching this on screen. So really looking at differences between then and now. Hopefully that's a little bit clearer.
Great. So what are some key tips to switch off from work in the evenings, i.e. when work keeps interrupting your thoughts, even when doing fun tasks?
Yeah, another great question. And, it's tricky too if we have email on our phone and we have our phone with us, and then, you get pinged every time a work email comes in. I think it's going to come back to planning ahead again. So I think if you, at the end of the workday, if you haven't finished what you've meant to finish or what you had hoped that you would finish, making a plan for when you will get that done, and even sometimes you don't know what's going to come up at work. So you could slot into your diary, I'm going to give myself 45 minutes to manage emails the following day, and anything, tricky that comes up in an email, I will have slotted that in this day. So I don't need to think about it if a work thought comes to mind, but it depends what the thought is. Like if it's about getting work done, we can obviously address that with planning ahead. But if it's about I'm questioning my performance and I'm thinking about how I performed today or how I came across in that meeting, I think recognizing that actually is a sign of overthinking, and overthinking makes us feel worse. It doesn't give us any answers. We can't overthink our way out of what we think we did in a meeting or didn't do. And just to recognize it makes me feel worse. I didn't observe any negative reactions. I wasn't given any specific really terrible feedback. So I don't need to think about this now. And maybe what I need to do right now is use this thought as a cue to reabsorb my attention in what I'm doing right now, whether that's with my children or my pets, or reabsorbing my attention in the program I might be looking at on TV. Or maybe I need to have a conversation with somebody, because that's not about work, but just having a conversation with somebody about what's new and good with them, because that will help to absorb my attention and what's going on for them, and that will interrupt these thoughts about work.
On a slightly related question, what do you advise for those times when you wake in the night and start worrying and can't go back to sleep?
Yeah, so that's a really good question too. And I think, if we wake in the night and we have a worry and there's something we can do about it immediately, the suggestion is to do something immediately. So whatever that is, but often we can't in the middle of the night, but it might be, I'm just guessing here, but I'm worried about the leak in the kitchen, and you know, is there anything I can do immediately? Probably not. You can't obviously call a plumber, but you could make it, like, obviously you will have put something underneath the leak, so it's probably catching water or whatever it is. But you could make a list of what you need to do. You could find the plumber's number. You could just be really clear what time you're going to call them, make a note of that. The suggestion is to get out of bed, not to lie in bed worrying, but to get out and do something a little bit active, not exercise or anything like that. But you know, you've spotted the leak, you make a note of it, you get the plumber's number already, write it out so that you can do that at you know, 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And then you do something relaxing after that. So you've done as much as you can to address the worry, recognize that it is worry and it is going to keep you awake, and then you do something really relaxing. And the suggestion is often to do that in another room, so you could sit and read, for example, or you could, you know, different things work for different people. You could try relaxation exercise back in your bed and try to go back to sleep. But it's tricky waking up with worry. But the answer is always to follow like this flow chart. Is there something I can do about the worry now? If so, yes, do it. If not, do a relaxing activity and try to go back to sleep.
So now we've had a good night's sleep, we're going to go on to the next question, which is about the morning. What is a good science-backed routine upon waking in the morning to feel ready and resilient to face the day?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's also individual about what makes you feel great and positive for the day. So for some people that might be a brief spurt of exercise, so like a short brisk walk or a run. I was in a research symposium yesterday and it was all about the emotion awe, AWE, and about how to increase awe in our lives, because the purpose of the spillover effect of experiencing awe is that you feel more energetic and more able to take on challenging tasks in your day. So whatever can increase the experience of awe. But often in this research, it was showing that going for a walk in nature increases the experience of awe and helps you to take a step back and see the bigger picture. And the research shows that it helps you to, you end up smiling more, and it gives you the experience of a smaller sense of self. So seeing yourself in the wider world and a smaller sense of self, as opposed to when we're very, very self-focused and overwhelmed with problems and feeling that we are the problem. Taking a walk outside and experiencing the awe in what you see around you can help to start the day on a really positive note. But it will be individual, and you will have activities that will increase that experience for you.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, are these steps/methods applicable to neurodivergent people, e.g. autistic, ADHD, or do they need to add anything?
It's a big question, thank you. So they haven't been researched with people with ADHD and other conditions. So I would imagine they may need to be adapted. But I don't, again, without more research, it's a really difficult one to answer. But I think if you have that particular condition, you could try an activity and see whether or not it works for you and what would make it easier to do. So I imagine planning ahead would be a helpful activity, but you may need to make some modifications, but I guess set it up as an experiment. So try the tool, see if it works and how it might need to be modified to work for you. That might be one way to try that.
Great, thank you. Do you think issues of excess stress are modern, or did we only start thinking about them recently? If modern, what should we be doing as a society, in addition to the incredible individual strategies you presented?
Thank you. It's such a good question. It's often one I think about. You know, when we think about, you know, our older generations and our ancestry and our family, and what was their definition of stress and what's our definition of stress. And, you know, I think the definition of stress has changed. I think today, feeling stressed, when we can have financial pressures and financial stress, of course, but it's also often about having a very full to-do list and not enough time to get everything done being constantly bombarded with requests or emails, or not being able to have that delineation between the end of a work day and the start of an evening, for example, and not having a clear work-life balance can really increase stress. So I think our societies have always been stressed, but I think the definition of stress has changed. So, I'm just thinking about like older generations might have been stressed about money or health, but I guess we still do have health and money stressors, but we have made advances in medicine, so it might be less stressful. But I think the difference is the advances in technology and how technology offers lots of solutions to lots of problems, but it also means that we're accessible all of the time, and it makes it that much harder to switch off, and switching off is really important for reducing stress.
Thank you. I think we've got time for about one more question. So where someone already has extensive mental health issues, where would you recommend start implementing these things? And then it says in brackets, where physical disabilities also exist. Very thought-provoking, thank you.
Thank you. So if somebody has mental health difficulties like anxiety or depression, I always recommend the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies program, which you can self-refer into. So that's, you would Google IAPT, IAPT, and then put in your postcode, and then it will give you your local IAPT services. There's usually more than one, and then you can choose and self-refer into the service for treatment for anxiety or depression, and you get an evidence-based treatment. And they also have treatments for people with enduring physical health conditions, so long-term physical health conditions. Some of the tools that I've talked about here overlap with some of the tools that someone might be taught if they have anxiety or depression. So self-focused attention, so being able to shift our attention from ourselves to the outside world, to cultivate an external focus, is something that you would run through in an anxiety treatment. And with depression, we would be working with a concept called behavioral activation, for example, about getting active. And that has overlaps with planning ahead. So you would, if you were depressed, be encouraged to plan your days and to include active behaviors in those days, so include a bit of exercise, for example. So there is some overlap between some of these tools and what might be covered in an anxiety or depression treatment.
Thank you very much. We have one point which is asking you to share the book title at the end, so if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. Otherwise, thank you very much for a wonderful talk. I think I speak for us all when I say that was absolutely fantastic, and I hope we will all start initiating these 7 steps. So thank you for the wonderful talk.